felt and talked about,
So we've called this presentation from the Open Ed group. I'll just introduce the 4 currently active members of the Open Ed group. There's David Wiley, Wayne Fisher, Jared Robinson, and myself, John Hilton. We'll all be chiming in and presenting in the next 3 presentations in this room. So I'm going to go quickly through these first couple slides because we've heard a lot about the general problems of the expensive textbooks, the high cost of education, and the damage that that can do to students. We've seen graphs like this before where the costs of textbooks are rising much faster than inflation. And the big question is, well, what do we do about it? And it's been proposed in other sessions that open textbooks could be a great part of the solution. And we've looked at a couple of different angles in terms of how can we quantify whether or not open textbooks really are an acceptable solution to some of the problems caused by proprietary textbooks. So first we can ask users of textbooks, such as professors or students, how they perceive the quality of open educational replacements for their textbooks. And we're not going to focus a lot on this today, but Dr. Bliss is in the audience, and I would reference you if you just Google Bliss and John 2013, there's an excellent article he wrote where several hundred students as well as their professors were surveyed. The basic question was, what do you think of the open textbook? Is it better, worse, or the same as the textbooks you normally use? And in general, about 20% of students said it's better, 10% said it's worse, and 70% said it's the same. So the bottom line is quality is there and is consistently improving. So another way that we can approach this question is to try to quantify how much money is actually being saved by using open textbooks. Is there just propaganda from different sources that's saying this is how much it costs, or can we actually measure in specific programs how much money is saved? And then third, and perhaps most importantly, we can measure the effectiveness of students in classes utilizing OER. Are they learning more? Are they learning less? Are they more likely to get good grades in a course? Are they more likely to drop out of the course? And so the focus in this 25-minute section has to do with the Kaleidoscope Open Course Initiative. How many of you teach at a Kaleidoscope school or involved in Kaleidoscope? Okay, awesome. So there's a lot of Kaleidoscope people in the room, and feel free to correct anything I say, because you're living the dream, I'm just writing about the dream. So initially, the Kaleidoscope Open Course Initiative, and this URL is useful if you'd like to look more information about the project, kaleidoscope.org. The initiative was originally comprised of 8 colleges serving predominantly at-risk students. It's now expanded. These colleges worked together to create courses that would replace the traditional textbooks with OER. During the 2011 and 2012 academic year, there was a pilot where at each of these institutions, some students were taking classes taught by professors using the OER materials, while other students in the same school taking the same course but a different professor were using traditional proprietary materials. And so our goal was to try to figure out in the 2011-2012 academic year, could we figure out exactly how much money was potentially saved by students who took the Project Kaleidoscope courses. And when I say potentially saved, that's just because we made some assumptions in our study that I'll talk about. And we also know that no matter what, not all students were going to have bought a textbook anyway. So there's some factor there. But if we had been smarter, and some of you will do this, and this is just a good lesson to be learned, we would have collected data at the very beginning of Project Kaleidoscope. As soon as a professor switched to use the open materials, we would have asked them, please give us the information on textbooks you are currently using so we could have had cost data in that way. Unfortunately, we weren't that forward looking, so we had to go backwards. So what we did this last year was we had a list of all of the teachers who were involved in the 2011-2012 Kaleidoscope project, including the ones who were teaching with the OER materials, as well as those who were teaching with the proprietary materials. So what we would do is we would go into the bookstore and look up by teacher, because at, say, one given institution, there might be 10 or 15 teachers teaching a course, and they might have 2 or 3 or more different sets of book requirements that they require. So for about 200 teachers, we went into their respective campus bookstores and looked up the courses that they taught during that year and what books they were actually requiring students to get. So here's one example. This was for an introductory biology course. The used textbook cost $79.75, but was not available, and a new version cost $106.25. So to have a standard methodology, we always used the new book price, because sometimes the used was available, sometimes it wasn't, unless there was a digital rental version, in which case we used the digital rental version price. Yeah?
It's really glaring back here. Can we turn the lights down just a little bit? Is that different?
Yeah, and this is probably just a poorly designed slide as well. We'll get some lights, but I don't know how much that will improve. Oh, hey,
That's better.
okay, you bet. So this was actually a huge undertaking to go into 200 different teachers' courses and try to dig out of the system what the books actually cost. And I know that there's data out there that say, you know, the average cost of a book is X. We could have used that, but we wanted to really try to quantify for these courses at these schools how much was actually saved. And so we have data like this for all the colleges. I'll just share 2 examples. So at Cerritos College, there were 5 different OER courses that we were tracking at this time. And you can see there's a variety of costs. So the developmental reading costs, this is on average. So when we averaged out all of the professors who were teaching developmental reading, it was $36.54 for that course. Other courses, like physical geography, were more expensive. Here you're seeing the number of students who were enrolled in the Kaleidoscope sections. And so this column goes along with this column, the amount potentially saved. So I'll just look at one example here. One of the largest expensive cost courses was physical geography. The book cost $102, and there were 363 students enrolled in the Kaleidoscope sections. So they potentially saved $37,000 by not having to buy that $100 textbook. Meanwhile, their peers at the exact same college, the exact same semester, were enrolled. There were 731 of them who were enrolled in non-Kaleidoscope versions of the course. They were spending potentially $74,000 on their textbooks. So we did this for other colleges. Let's just take a look at one other example. And I want to point out, so here at the College of Redwoods, every course is more expensive. The Introduction to Biology, let's see, that's not the example I wanted. Developmental reading here was $53, where developmental reading here was $36. So there was some differences from college to college. And you can see here that collectively across the Intro to Bio, Intro to Psych, Intro to Developmental Reading, the average cost of textbooks at College of Redwoods was $154.21. And I should mention that this is a weighted average. So it's the amount the textbook costs based on how many people were enrolled in the courses. So college by college, you can start to see some real savings. Some of you might have been to the Lumen Learning session right before this. One of the things that they pointed out is it's really powerful when you can go to a college and say, your students could have saved this much money. So in the College of Redwoods, you know that students spent approximately $200,000 in this year on 3 courses that OER materials were developed and actually being used at that college. So this slide violates all the good principles of PowerPoint, but it was just too good to pass up. When we aggregated it across all the schools, so for example, the fundamentals of biology, that was taught at 3 different Kaleidoscope schools. So we took the dollar amount at each of those 3 schools and came up with an average. So across all 3 of those Intro to Bio courses, it's $148 per textbook. The students in the Kaleidoscope sections, potentially save $50,000. Students in the non-Kaleidoscope version of those courses potentially spend $125,000. Then we aggregated that all the way down, and we'll look at, there will be a better slide for this, but I want to key in on this number, $90.61. So what we found is, in this study, across these classes, at these colleges, the average textbook costs $90. And to me, that was a really valuable number for me personally, because I've seen the statistics and I've gotten those from other sites. But where I had actually gone in, looked at the website, seen this is actually what it's really costing students in, not some kind of supposed course that I've read about on some site, but this is a real course by those students, really kind of impacted me to see that. And so then we started just averaging things out. So just in this pilot program, and I want to stress that there were only a few thousand students at this time, that number in just this Project Kaleidoscope has expanded substantially. And when we start to aggregate other programs, it gets bigger and bigger. So just in this one program, in 1 year, students save $1.2 million. So if we go with this, the average textbook costs $90, and the average full-time student buys 10 textbooks per year, and that's $900 saved per student. And then we start to think bigger. So there's 20 million students in the United States. And let's say that some of them are graduate students and they don't buy very many textbooks, and some are part-time students so they don't buy very many books. Let's just say on average they buy 5 textbooks per year. So that means these students collectively are saving $9 billion per year, or $72 billion over a 4-year degree program. And this just kind of leads me to believe how staggering the numbers are. And I know it's not all about money, but economics drives a lot. And I think when you start to see in context what a huge impact cost savings have, it really creates a powerful case for open educational resources. But saving all this money does us no good if, in fact, the resources aren't good, or if the educational outcomes are not as great. And so we also tried to track within the same Kaleidoscope schools. Oh, I haven't described that. We got this time, don't worry. That's my segue to Jared Robinson, who's going to talk about the other equation, educational outcomes.
So we also, for the same year, 2011, 2012, we took a look at outcomes. We wanted to know if students were performing as well in the measurables across these different courses. So we looked at things like pass rate, pass with a C- or better, grade achieved in the course, and those were the measures that we were able to actually compare across institutions. So we took data from this 2011-2012 school year, and specifically from 7 schools in these 7 high demand college courses. And this ultimately was about 2,725 students in Project Kaleidoscope courses, and then about 4 times that many, 9,000 students in non-Project Kaleidoscope courses as well. We used propensity score matching to try to create matched groups, because these groups were different in expectation. That's what this graph over here shows, is that top, huh? This one? Okay, awesome. So this one right here shows the ones in red are the treatment group. Just knowing what we know about who they were, what their race was, gender, socioeconomic information, we could predict in many cases what group they were. We could tell that the groups weren't equal. So we used propensity score matching to balance that. That's actually a 99% improvement. This isn't the starkest example of that balancing in the graph form here, but we're able to create a much more balanced group and approximate random sampling. And we feel like that gives us a lot more reliable results. We use regression analysis, so we controlled for a number of things that might compete with textbooks to explain how students perform in the class. These are things like socioeconomic status, gender, what school they went to, what class they took, whether the class was online or face-to-face or blended, whether they were Pell eligible, race, things like that. So we controlled for all those things. And we found for the overall group that there was no significant difference between in the grade results for students who took Project Kaleidoscope courses and non-Project Kaleidoscope courses. We also looked to see if there was an interaction, to see if maybe students who were Pell eligible performed differentially. differentially. Maybe they got textbooks at higher rates than they would have otherwise and performed better, but we didn't see that. And we see similar results when we compare pass rates as well. So that's one of the things that we see from this data is that there's not a significant difference. We also looked at the data in a couple of different ways. Oh yeah, so we also looked at the courses individually, so the biology course and the math course, and each of those had the same result, that there was not a significant difference for the OER. So a couple of different ways we can think of this. One is we would hope to see increases, right? We'd hope that this increases textbook access. We would hope that it increases completion rates across the course, that ultimately people do better because they have access to the book from day one. We didn't see that in this data yet. But you can also see that as good news, right? That we were able to encourage and promote, the Project Kaleidoscope was able to promote these same success rates with limited cost to students, limited to no cost to students, which is wonderful. And so students were able to save money, and then they were also able to succeed at comparable rates, which we see as a real victory for Project Kaleidoscope. There are also some limitations, though, with this. One of the limitations, and sorry, this is small for those of you in the back. This is a big room, which is awesome. Project Kaleidoscope, in addition to offering textbook replacement, also offers other services, like curriculum development. So when we look at this, we don't know exactly what happens when you take the other stuff and just leave the textbooks there. There's more going on than just textbooks. Another limitation is anytime you look at grades and GPA and what grade you get and compare that across teachers or across school, that's a really slippery measurement. That means different things to different people. It means different things in different circumstances, and so we acknowledge that that's problematic. That we also had some inconsistencies in how the data was reported across institutions, and then we also know that this was the first year implementation of a program, so this could possibly be a J curve, right, where it's low now but might be going up in the future, or there could be a novelty or a newness bump, and it could be high now and going down in the future. So as a result, we're doing second-year data analysis right now. We're looking at the 2012-2013 data. We've tightened up our uniformity across institutions. We've also developed a different way of looking at persistence data, because that's one of our main questions, is outcomes in terms of persistence. So are students enrolling at higher rates in winter term if they had OER available to them in fall term? That's a question that we're looking at. And then the other thing that we want to do and are looking to do is bring in partners beyond just Project Kaleidoscope, because to the extent that we can do that, we can start to try to isolate what part of the statistical phenomenon that are happening here are a result of the textbook itself, and what are a result of other innovation or other services offered by Project Kaleidoscope, or offered to Project Kaleidoscope schools. So we wanted to leave 5 minutes of questioning or so, and it looks like we've maybe done that, and we'll go ahead and open it up and start here in the front.
Thank you so much. It's really great that you're looking at that, asking these really hard and good questions, so that there's, we get a lot more data around OER. My question is actually very benign, which is, in what form are your textbooks offered to students? Are they offered through the institution? What cost is there to students, if any?
It's a great question. Dave, do you want to field that, David?
Yeah, no, so in every case, there's no cost to students whatsoever. And the materials are offered online. So now, if a student wants to go down to Kinko's and print that out or something, they could, and they might incur some cost that way. But all the materials are there, and they're all online.
Yeah.
I'm a little fuzzy on dates. Is this after the NGLC grant money?
Kaleidoscope was funded with NGLC grant.
Well, and
so
I've
this
seen
is-
Kaleidoscope presentations during, I guess, after the first year, or maybe the first 9 months of when Kaleidoscope was in place, and I just wasn't sure where this timing was.
This is,
It's 2011, 2012.
Yeah, so this is the initial year.
Okay, oh, right, okay.
So the second year of Kaleidoscope, we're doing data crunching right now on that, and then waiting for second drafts of data to come in from an institution, so that hopefully we'll have results on year 2 coming up soon as well.
on the numbers that you reported out,
The cost numbers or the outcome numbers?
the cost numbers,
Okay.
they were all, where in that data was it factored in the fact that we know that 100% of the students don't actually purchase a textbook? So, you know, out of maybe 325 who took a biology course, even the,
Right, some of them
I mean,
wouldn't have
all
purchased a book
325
anyways.
wouldn't have bought a book, whether it was a rental or whatever. They had zero cost because they didn't actually acquire the text materials.
Right.
Where is that factored into that data?
So on those two tables, it says the amount potentially saved. So,
Right.
so had 100% of students purchased it,
Right.
that was that data. And then if you want to say, well, at my school, I know that 20% of students don't buy the textbooks, you would multiply that by 0.8 to get the resulting number. Or if you think a third of students don't buy textbooks, then you multiply it by 2/3 to get the amount remaining. But for our calculations, we wanted to look at the potential amount savings, assuming everyone did. Acknowledging that everyone doesn't, the numbers are still pretty staggering.
Right, and so just a follow-up, so is there a way for us to capture that then? Because, I mean, I'm in the same position now where I'm trying to get some measurements. And that's the idea that I knew that 100% of them didn't buy, right? When it was a cost. So now the impact is even greater because I captured people who never would have had text materials, who now do have text materials. Do you see where?
I get what you're
I mean,
saying.
and that's a huge impact
Yeah,
when
let's
you
look-
talk about evaluation.
Yeah, David's got some
Yeah,
thoughts on that.
Linda, were you in the last presentation across the hall?
Briefly.
Okay, so one of the slides had, so Florida Virtual Campus did a national survey, and there are numbers there that say things like 23% of students regularly go without,
Right.
60% sometimes go without. You could use that data and build a model that you could dump into Excel and
But I think
take
we
the
I think
total
that
amount
would be an
potentially
interesting-
saved, and then see, you know, what, according to the Florida Virtual data. But
And
but these numbers are all either new or digital rental too. They
Sure.
don't account for used. And even if you could get used, were there 3 used copies available or 20 used? I mean, at some point it gets pretty convoluted.
But I just what I'm thinking is in terms of reporting out impact,
Mm-hmm.
is that
Could be
it's
another way to
even
analyze
bigger
that.
Right.
than what we're reporting because we know that it goes beyond the cost.
It goes beyond the cost impact because you're not comparing OER textbook use versus non-OER. You're just sometimes comparing OER versus nothing.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
That's a great idea. Thank you. Yes.
I'm from Chatham State, but this is actually a collaboration of 2 and 4-year colleges.
That is
It
correct.
travels across geographic
Yes.
regions from New York to California. And I think that's an important part of this because you've got different kinds of students in different regions, so which makes this, I think, interesting too.
It was also, you know, one of the important things in the propensity score matching, right, is that we ended up balancing those across groups. Even though the original numbers weren't balanced, the propensity score matching helped us to actually say, you know, this is something that we're not, this isn't an artifact of the fact that there are some different populations in this. We
Say
able to balance.
30 seconds more layman's description of what propensity score matching does.
That anytime you've got a non-experimental educational study, there's going to be differences in groups that are not chance related. It's just systematic. Colleges are different. There are different proportions taking different classes. We use what we can know about the students, including where they came from, and then demographic information to create a balance in those groups to make it as much like an experiment as we possibly can on the back end. That's what that propensity score matching is.
Yeah, so I wanted to address what Lynn said, and one of the things I've been trying to determine is on the cost feature. Okay, so with my students who have the open textbook, and I've been looking across at my college because we have about 120 sections of elementary statistics per year that we offer at our community college, and what I was trying to figure out was, of the students who did not complete the course, right? So, and they were in a class, the drop rates were higher at our college with the students who were not using the collaborative statistics and the open book. And so what was happening, and what I've been trying to get good data on, again, it's very, very difficult, is the overall cost, because those students now paid to take the course again. So not only did they have a textbook cost, or they didn't have the textbook cost, whichever one, they also paid another $200 to $300 to repeat the course, which is more than the textbook cost was. And so it gets very, very difficult to figure that out, but I think what's important here on this, because I've done the same thing at my school where we think somewhere between $1.2 and $1.7 million for the students just for one course, is that we say, okay, what if my numbers are really inflated? What if we really only saved $900,000? Yeah, okay, fine. What if we really only saved $700,000? Yeah, okay, fine. What if I'm really just a terrible misjudge of numbers, given that I have graduate degrees in statistics, and I really just saved $500,000? The point is, we've saved $500,000, and students are not passing at a lower success rate. So I don't want to say that the book and having the book, but one of the points that I did study was students who had a book or access to a book on day one versus students who waited 2 weeks for financial aid to come in. And they dropped, the ones who had to wait already got behind and they dropped, and then they took it again. And so that $250 or so that they're paying to repeat the course isn't even figured into this amount.
Thanks, Robert.
Thank you so much. Go ahead, Ed.